everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. Today's guests are able to offer a unique insight into Phish's music because they each play in a Phish cover band. Not only that, but they both play keyboards in separate Phish cover bands. What are the odds? One of our guests, Nate, plays keyboards in a Phish cover band called Adam Night's Buried Alive, and Hannah plays keys for the Lumpy Heads. Both bands are based out of the Carolinas and play around the Southeast, so if you're a Phish fan from Asheville to Atlanta, keep your eyes out for Adam Night's Buried Alive and the Lumpy Heads. It may not be a shock to find out that both Nate and Hannah run in kind of the same social circles, so as a result, Nate took Hannah to her first Phish shows, July 31st and August 1st of 2021, Phish's first tour back after the postponed 2020 summer tour. While both Alpharetta shows are excellent, Nate and Hannah agreed on one major highlight to discuss today, the band's 30-minute version of Tweezer that was played on Night 2 at Alpharetta, August 1st, 2021. A major highlight of the year and possibly of the band's career, this Tweezer journeys all over the place with ambience, straight rock, funky start-stop jamming, and much more. So, let's join Nate and Hannah to talk about why foam is easier to play than you think, getting some alone time on the lawn, and more as we discuss Tweezer from August 1st, 2021 in Alpharetta, Georgia. Nate and Hannah, welcome to Attendance Bias. Thank you for being here. This is a first in that having two musicians each that play in Phish cover bands on this podcast. So this is exciting. I have so many questions, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But before we introduce each of you and get into why you're here, well, one reason why you're here, though, is to discuss an epic monster Tweezer from the summer tour of 2021, and that is from August 1st, 2021, at what I found out is called Amerispank Amphitheater. But Nate, I'm guessing for all intents and purposes, it's just Alpharetta, right?
Yes.
So we have Nate from Adam Night's Buried Alive and Hannah from the Lumpy Heads. Hannah, how are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. Excited to talk about this Tweezer and also excited to hear a little bit about what it is like being in a Phish cover band, having been in various bands, both original and cover bands myself. I always thought that being in a Phish cover band would be impossible. I thought it would be impossible for there to even exist a Phish cover band when there's a Grateful Dead cover band on every corner on any given night. Their songs are, for the most part, a lot simpler in terms of musical technique. Phish, when I was learning to play the drums and I would sit down and listen to something like David Bowie or You Enjoy Myself, I would say, well, this is not going to happen. This is impossible. So I'm really curious what it's like to be on the inside looking out for those of us who air guitar or air drum. But both of you do neither. You're both keyboard players, right?
Yes.
So let me ask you, Nate, how did the two of you meet? Is there just some listserv or text thread for all the Phish cover band keyboard players?
No, we met organically around town. Really, Hannah went to the governor's school, like the art school in Greenville. Is it a magnet school?
It was actually the Fine Arts Center.
Oh, the Fine Arts Center. That's what it's called.
Yes.
And so she has played around, and I think the first time I met Hannah was at like kind of a super jam with Drew Wally.
Yeah.
He was doing a super jam, like a mutual friend of ours, doing a super jam dead thing. There was Hannah there and another guy on keys, and for some reason, I only had my synth, and I just got up for a few minutes. I was like, I'm going to let these guys get to it. They're all having fun, and I mostly watched that night. But then I knew they were in something called Jerry's Nub, which is a kick-ass Dead tribute that they were in. These young guys, like my little nieces and nephews, is what it felt like. So there was Jerry's Nub, and then once I was catering, and I saw the same guys, y'all were doing a jazz combo thing.
Mm-hmm.
At Zen. So just around the scene is kind of how we've met, and we talked a little bit.
Yeah, I think our friendship really began to blossom after I went and saw Adam Night's Buried Alive, because they're based in Greenville, South Carolina, which is where I'm from. My best friend actually takes lessons from Adam Knight himself, the guitar player of the cover band. And so we went and saw them at a local brewery and all kind of like rekindled connections that we had. And since we both played Phish, we just kind of like stayed in touch ever since and stuff, and have been able to have a really cool friendship of like sharing the music from the same lens and learning the same tunes and sending each other lead sheets and transcription ideas and all that. So it's been really fun.
Well, Hannah, you just revealed that Nate's band is Adam Knight's Buried Alive. What is the name of your Phish cover band?
So we are called the Lumpy Heads. We initially were called Gunslinging Parrots when I joined. I moved to Asheville during my freshman year of college in the spring of 2021. And I was actually just starting to really get into Phish at the time, was at the end of 2020 into 2021. So I went and saw this. They play every Thursday night at the One Stop, which is a iconic bar in downtown Asheville. They've got music 6 out of the 7 days a week, like all night or until 2 a.m. when they close. And
Great pizza. I
yeah,
love the pizza.
it's so good. The pizza's fantastic. And everybody there is really cool. But I heard that there was a Phish cover band playing around, and that was the closest thing that I could have possibly gotten to seeing Phish live at the time. So I would take the bus over from my school to the downtown and go and told them that I was just a huge fan of their music and stuff. And then I guess through just playing in the scene, and I was doing like a Grateful Dead jam one of the other nights, the drummer in the band saw me play and gave me his number and just stayed in touch if they ever needed a substitute. And then one day they needed a sub, and then I came in and I never left the band after that.
Oh, you really Lou Gehrig did. Lou Gehrig, when he set his record for most number of consecutive baseball games played, the first baseman sat out that day with a headache. And then Lou Gehrig came in and just never left. Played for something like 3,000 games straight.
It worked out really well because the piano player at the time got offered another really amazing musical opportunity that kind of was more fit more with his schedule and availability. And it worked out great for me because I was getting super duper into Phish at the time. So like each week I was having to learn like a whole set list worth of new tunes. And our guitarist back in the day was like knew all of the tunes. And so she would send us a set list with some of the hardest songs and be like, we're not changing the set list. And so I would be toying away in my dorm room, like during exam week, transcribing foam and stuff, trying to get all these tunes learned. But it was really cool getting to like get into Phish and learn the music at the same time. I think it really had an influence on me and my playing.
So Hannah, you listed Asheville as kind of your base of operations. Is that where any listeners here could see you in the bands that you're in?
Absolutely. So the Lumpy Heads, we still play at the One Stop every Thursday night from 10 to 1. We play around town other times, like we play at another brewery called One World West. They're all very close to downtown Asheville and have an amazing scene there. But the weekly Thursday gigs usually keep us pretty busy because we all have other bands and stuff that we do. So for the Lumpy Heads, Asheville is definitely the primary location. And we also stream on IMAVL's YouTube page. So if you're not able to go out and make it to the show in person, we're able to get a good amount of people watch it through the live stream as well.
And Nate, how about Adam Knight's Buried Alive? You mentioned South Carolina before. Where would most people or any listeners in the Southeast be able to catch you guys?
That is varies a little bit more. Unfortunately, Greenville and really South Carolina is having a problem with venues closing down because of liquor licenses. If you look at, it's called South Carolina venue crisis, like it's a thing. We're getting people to sign petitions. So like 3 of our places have closed down, which sucks. But last night, Friday, we played a private party. We'll be at Swanson's Warehouse on July 28th. But we really go out of town more than play locally. So we've gone to, we're looking at one at Smith's Bar in Atlanta. We've been to Lincoln Theater in Raleigh twice. and then Poorhouse in Charleston. We've played on the deck there. Those are kind of some of our main circuit. We're kind of trying to get into Charlotte, so it's a little bit of challenge because we are not quite Asheville as far as cool places to play. Um, but we are getting to some cool places. Atlanta, we had two gigs that weren't so huge, and then the third one that we just played, we got a great turnout, and it was like, yes, we're in with Atlanta now. It's a little more challenging. The challenge of doing every week in a weekly residency, like that kind of makes my brain hurt because I do get to sit in with them from time to time. I'm aware that they don't repeat show after show in the same place, so that's a challenge. So we have a little more breathing room as far as planning our sets and things, and we try not to repeat in the same town or the same place. But we do try to have something new like almost every set. So what happens is we'll play new songs here and then the same new songs a couple times in a row, and then we don't repeat them, and then they kind of get sprinkled in later. And that's just kind of a pattern that's worked for us, but it's the most fun thing ever. I found the way I found them was there were three of them in a photo because their keyboard guy was sick that day, and so I saw the photo and I reached out and said, "So is your third guy? Like, why is there three of you? Do you want some keys? I just got this Nord Electro. Came to an auditioned with Maze, auditioned with Stash and Susie, and then I was in, and it's been the most fun thing ever."
Well, you mentioned coming up with set lists and how that's a challenge sometimes. Phish fans kind of create, algorithmic, drive you up the wall, a beautiful mind style studies of how and why
Yeah.
Phish pick certain set lists and why did they play this song. And I didn't like that they played Susie after Maze, and so on and so forth, and count me among them. I'm wondering, as fans yourselves, are you able to kind of separate your fandom from your role as a performer? In that, are there songs that you favor, or that are you able to kind of play with enthusiasm songs that you personally don't like as an audience member when you go to see Phish? So a lot of their newer stuff, like More or Set Your Soul Free, if you go to the bathroom during those performances when you go see Phish, but when you're on stage now, you have to play it with as much enthusiasm. Do you ever find any conflict there between your personal preference and then your role as a performer? Hannah, do you ever come up with that? Does that ever pose a challenge for you? Or is this the first time you've ever thought of it because of me?
Oh no, I've definitely thought about it before. And usually, like going into the show, so I write the set lists for the Lumpy Heads. And so I definitely trickle in all of that, like algorithmic stuff, or like piece together, like try and tell a story through the set lists and how lyrics interchange with each other, because it's like Trey's songwriting is like this big pool of words that all are kind of the same, and then they use all these words in different conglomerations throughout these different songs. So it's cool how they can all like interweave together. That being said, there are a few songs that I don't typically listen to a ton, but when it comes to performing them, I tend to enjoy performing them more than I enjoy listening to them.
Have there been any songs that you've grown to appreciate better? Like the first time you heard it live as an audience member, you didn't care for it, you went to go get a beer. But now that you learned how to play it, it's something that you like and appreciate even more. What's
Yeah.
an example of one of those songs?
I would say that Susie Greenberg is one of them, just because when I got really into Phish, I was super into like the complex stuff. And so I was like, this one's a little on the simpler side, but it's still groovy and I like it. But then like learning how to play it and then getting to like actually have like the Page solo in that song completely changed it and made it much more enjoyable. And now it's like one that I enjoy listening to and watching and playing.
Yeah, no, I just thought actually of a pretty good example. It's also a good time, a good chance to mention my other band. So my other band is called Origami. It's a play on origami, like folding paper, but with an aura, like a new age aura. So we do a wide range of covers, but so the song that I thought of when you mentioned that is Everything's Right. And I actually played that with them first. And I thought, well, it's a great lyric. It's a good feel good song. It's fitting for Origami's sound. It's simpler. It is not the first thing I would go to listen to, but it's extremely cathartic to play. And Buried Alive, we debuted our first Everything's Right just over the weekend. And it went on for a good 15 minutes, and it was just so mellow and so. And also, I think it's a great pandemic song. The album came out in the middle of COVID. It was just a gift to everybody, and to hear Everything's Right. But really, the Just Hold Tight part, really just right here. So that is definitely one that I would not have thought of as much until we started playing it. It feels deeper and more meaningful. And the songs that are easier to play also feel better to play. And I understand what Trey goes a lot to the easier ones because they're cathartic. You don't have to overthink. You don't have to be like with Reba. It's like I'm gonna mess it up. I'm gonna mess it up. I gotta you don't have that mental load when you do the easier ones. I'd say Character Zero is another one kind of like that. It just feels so good.
We've heard about each of you as players. So those of you at home or in your car listening, if you're in the Asheville area or the Greenville area, or I guess kind of anywhere in the Southeast when it comes to Buried Alive, check them out, look them up. Let's hear about the two of you, Nate and Hannah, as fans, as Phish fans, not just Phish players, as part of the attendance bias lightning round.
Attendance bias lightning round.
Hannah, what was your first Phish show, and what do you remember about it?
Alpharetta 2021 was my first Phish show.
Oh, so we're here. We're going to hear about it in just a few minutes.
Yeah. And it was, to this date, probably the best weekend of my entire life. Maybe not. I don't know. It's up there, but it was a great time. But I was so excited and could not believe that I was getting to hear all of this music live from the source itself. Getting to just be with a community of people that were all singing and dancing and knowing the lyrics. And we actually had the first night, there were a line of people that we were all at on the lawn that were all Phish keyboard players. And so all of us knew the parts, and it was so cool. At set break, we were all talking about it and stuff. So that was really cool.
Did they happen to play the Squirming Coil at any point during that show? Because I feel all of you must have just tripped over yourselves.
I don't think there was no coil that weekend.
There's no coil, but there was a killer turtle in the clouds that I had never witnessed before. So getting to watch them all dance too was super cool live.
That was one of the main highlights for me, especially night one. Those Kesvat Vox songs, they are just so absolutely giddy when they are playing those songs, and that's the thing about Phish I love is when they're giddy. They're just so I get to play these songs. And they did the dance, and it just always yes, Turtle in the Clouds, so good.
Oh, I was gonna say my friends and I were all trying to figure out what songs they were gonna open with and stuff, and they ended up playing Ghost the night before. But we were all like, what if they opened with Ghost and stuff like that? And then they opened with Sand, and we were just like, I'll take it. I was like, tomato, tomato. I'm cool with it. And so that was a really cool start to the 2-night run.
Nate, what was your first show, and what do you remember about it?
Charlotte 99, which back then was Blockbuster, and it's been 3 other things, and now it's some boring bank. Basically Charlotte. And that was the first time they've played there. And actually, to this day, I haven't missed a show there. That's kind of my home place. So there's been some talk about Summer 99 on your podcast. I agree with all of it. I think it is one of the best and most underrated tours. Summer and fall 99, I'm a 99 guy all the way. This one, so July 7th, if you look it up, this is an odd set list for a new fan. There was a lot of things going on. I didn't know. It was the second time they played What's the Use. I had no idea what it was. It was the first time ever my ears heard Down with Disease, and that riff, that lick in Down with Disease, that is a dopamine triggering guitar lick. It's just, so I heard this, and that was a good 10 to 12 minutes, just blazing, ripping type 1 disease jam. So the set started with 2001, but like 10 minutes of that was just space noise. And I was in line. I was like, okay, they're gonna start something. Okay, like I didn't know about 2001. I didn't know about disease. Another funny thing is, I was working at a summer camp, and a guy drove me there. He had his own ticket, so I kind of was left on my own on the lawn. But he had told me that, oh, if they play Yem, they play You Enjoy Myself. Like that's really special. They don't play it that much. If they play it, like that's a huge rarity. It'd be like so. He's kind of more into Panic, so he had this idea that like, this was a rarity. They did play YEM, and I
I'm
about
pretty sure
lost
that's
my
their
shit.
most played song live.
Yeah,
Like by a
yeah.
lot.
I mean, he may have been thinking like for this tour, they're not like I don't know, but they played a YEM. I just like because I was 19. I'm pretty sure I was pretty much sober. I don't think I did anything illegal that time. And then Derek Trucks for the encore. He came out for Possum and Bitch. So I learned a lot. There was a My Left Toe. It was like Velvet Sea, My Left Toe, like some this great ambient stuff. I think stacked up with other tours, other shows in '99. It was not. I would not say it was a highlight of the summer. It was an odd first show, but still memorable, still awesome. Any first Phish show is going to be a good time.
Switching ahead, fast forwarding a bit, Nate, what was your most recent show? And what did you think
My
of
most
it?
recent show was Alpharetta 21.
Oh, wow. It's coming up quite a bit today.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's been made clear yet, but I was taking Hannah to her first show.
Oh, no, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. We went to this. That's that was my idea for this, was that we went to this together. Taking somebody to their first show is such an honor, and I think there should be a sponsorship program for fans
Big
to
Brothers.
take younger fans. Like like a sponsor a noob, like because Hannah was the main thing I remember. Was Hannah was just ecstatic, and it made me remember my first few shows. She was like calling her friends with the play-by-play of what was played, and to me, like, having seen more, it's like just kind of a happy blur. I'm like, yeah, it was great. It's a good time. Yes, like,
I was losing my mind the whole week.
Yeah.
I was like, he did such a good job of just like having like a safeguard or like a buddy system or like a home base to come to over the weekend was super duper nice, because other than Nate, like none of my friends were able to make it and stuff. So it was like within my group and my other band that I play with back at home, where we're all big Phish fans and stuff. It's like it was interesting going off and doing this thing on my own. And so having Nate there was really cool, and definitely made the experience special and gave me a ride. So that was
well, that's clutch. Yeah.
Such an honor. It was such an honor.
In 2000, I took my brother to his first show, and he's 3 years older than me, but it was mostly because he had a ride. He had the car.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was a little bit terrified because I do not like driving. And also I had met her mom, who is super cool. But when I've met somebody's mother and they know that I'm taken to a Phish show, I'm like informally, like unspokenly charged with, I'm responsible for her safety, which is like, and nobody said anything like that, but I just felt that, as a dad, because I've got, my kids they're not old enough to go to shows yet. Yeah. So I was a little bit scared, more scared the second night because I was driving, and then somebody else also needed a ride. So the ride home. That was
crazy. That was so funny.
Yeah. I felt pretty good driving home. It all went great, but there was just a little tiny bit of terror about something going. I was also in the middle of my divorce. Like my divorce had not finalized yet, and anything bad happens could throw off a lot of things. So that probably made me be more careful. But during the Tweezer that we were talking about, she had ran up to the front, and I was like, oh, she's running around somewhere. Like, oh, it's okay. And then I kind of was like, well, she's at the front. She's adorable, so they let her up to the front.
I didn't get very far. I was just exploring. I didn't get up too far, but I was like, I don't know. I've come to really enjoy, like, if I have the freedom to be at a Phish show, or not just alone, but I do have some like alone time at the show. I just love dancing and walking and singing along to the songs and getting into the song through like moving around the crowd and like
I like that
seeing
too.
what they're doing like in the GA, it's like the
Yeah.
lawn especially. It was really cool, and I ran into some friends, like another Asheville keyboardist during the Tweezer. He was on the other side of the lawn, and we were just like,
Oh,
well, we
who
you
was
know
it?
Gus.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
Gus.
I
Oh,
saw
that's
Gus.
cool.
I run into Gus at Phish shows quite frequently now. It's so funny. It's just like, oh,
Maybe I saw Gus at some point. There's a good chance that I saw Gus.
yeah.
Switching gears a
Um,
little bit, Nate, I assume you've been playing keyboards for longer than you've been in this cover band in Buried Alive. But when you kind of made that shift and you said, all right, now I'm in a Phish cover band, were there any songs in Phish's repertoire that you were kind of intimidated to learn? Like you felt like you bit off a little more than you could chew? With like, all right, well, next week we're going to have foam. We're going to play foam at practice. And you kind of like turned pale.
Split Open and Melt has a weird section for like me and Hannah have talked about it. There's about 30 seconds that is just indecipherable. There's a transcript somewhere that Trey has released of that, but it's a mess and it's got stuff
chicken
missing.
scratch.
It has a note that says something is missing from here. I have seen other keyboard players make videos and they're both different from the transcript, but just doing it enough, I'm able to get through it. I actually played it earlier with gunslinging. So there's times when I played a song with gunslinging parrots or lumpy heads that I haven't done with Buried Alive yet. So I crash course, learn it quickly to get through a gig, and then I study it more. I have more time to study it with Buried Alive. There are other things that are difficult. One of your questions was what's difficult that people wouldn't think of. I would say a lot of singing. Especially Paige has some higher parts. It's easy to get off key, or you go falsetto when you should be kind of belting. But he's got an amazing range. Good times, bad times, maybe not happening unless
I was
somebody
going to
else can
say,
do
do you
it.
have to hit that
Yeah.
part, the Robert Plant part toward the end?
No, we have not. We've not considered good times, bad times yet, and it may be like anything can happen. Mercury, it's easy to learn, but it requires laser-like focus to do the Red Queen part is in 7/8, and then there's there's the arpeggios with the marimba part, and then it's like, how do we do a marimba part? We had to make a choice to interpret that, but that requires it just requires so much focus, and we've played it 3 times. I don't think we've quite nailed it. And then the water stars singing, like that's hard to sing at Paige's range. So there's vocal challenges and focus challenges. It doesn't sound as difficult, but that's a more recent one. But man, the jam is
Yeah.
worth it. It's
I wish
worthwhile.
Phish would still do it. Hannah, on the flip
Yeah.
side, instead of songs that you were intimidated to learn or that psyched you out a little bit, the opposite. Were there any songs that, when it was suggested to you, you thought they would be really difficult, but turned out to be a lot simpler than you predicted?
Yeah, so especially with some other early compositions, you notice that Trey uses a lot of similar motifs in a lot of the same songs. Like learning foam was honestly a little easier for me than I thought it was going to be. I was a little intimidated because it just sounds so dissonant and stuff, but it really is just like going up chromatically and then allowing the chords to kind of shift accordingly with that. And then there's just like that one, like the da 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 da. Page also uses that same idea, those same notes. He spaces them out farther and switches it up a little bit, but that's a similar motif that's used when in Golgi, when it's like they call him lysosome because I run so fast. It's like
Oh, yeah, I hear it now.
and it's interesting that they all come from that similar album or the same
Hey,
album.
I thought that's also in Fluffhead. Right before they go
Mhm.
to chase, he goes da na 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 na. And he does it, and
Before they hit the
which,
sea,
yeah.
into the beast. But
Uh,
I would say that that was definitely a simpler tune. Yem was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, but that's just for the piano part because I know that the guitar player part on that is a lot more challenging. Those two complex songs I found to be relatively simpler than some of the others. Rift was also one that I was kind of intimidated by at first, but once you get the flow of it, that's probably my favorite song to play.
Oh,
It's
it's so much fun.
it's so
It's so
epic.
much fun.
It's so
Feels
extra
so good.
fun. And Reba, of course, is like I was really intimidated by that one, but I was taking it piece by piece. And I, in my other band, and I'll go ahead and throw this in now real quick, but Jerry Snub, the band that Nate was telling y'all about earlier, we've evolved into a new band called Fern, and also based in Greenville. We play Dead, Phish, Pink Floyd, Steely Dan, like anything you can think of, are in the process of writing originals. We're starting to kind of work on learning Reba or we had played like Tweezer and a couple of other easy Phish tunes while we were still predominantly Grateful Dead. And then when I started listening to Reba, I was like, I have to learn this. And chipped away at it slowly but surely. And I mean, that one's really hard, but once you kind of develop the muscle memory to it and look at the way that like the keys move, there's a flow to it that is really cool, but that also came with like a lot of trial and error.
I
But
imagine most of these songs come with a lot of trial and error.
yeah.
To wrap this up, my favorite question, I think everybody's favorite question on the lightning round, Hannah, and then Nate, what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
Oh, well, as a thing of itself, maybe not like a specific thing, like the outfits that people wear is like one of my favorite side plots because everybody looks great, first off, but you just see t-shirts that have the most niche statements on them at like the specific point of your time at the Phish shows, and it's just like interesting that I'm reading a shirt that says this exact same thing as I'm thinking this exact thought right now. So that's been a little trippy. Oh, the weirdest thing I've seen at a Phish show, I went to Dick's this past year and watching a naked guy
Lucky.
run around after when the storm hit. That was pretty wild. I didn't actually get to see the naked guy when he first ran out, but before he went out, everybody was just coming and taking turns, like making their run for it and just watching the crowd act. Just like they're like, Phish is coming back on. Like, we ain't going nowhere. And everybody was just like having fun. I was cracking up. I was like, it was a cool opportunity to get some time for the theme of the show, or like the first set was like the audience and then the second
Right.
set was like the long set that they played, and so I think that whole experience was just so weird.
Nate, how about yourself? Weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show?
I had to think kind of hard about this because you see things and you're like, WTF, and then you forget things. So the weird thing that I've chosen to relate actually is more in my mind was in a weird place because of reasons. So this is a Coventry story, but this is not the sad part of Coventry. This was the hanging out before Coventry, before the shows. So that actually that was a good time, like hanging out before things happened the way they happened at Coventry. But there was a gypsy wagon, like this wooden wagon thing that was being like marched around,
On the
and kind of a
grounds?
like yes, on the
Oh,
ground.
was it the big elephant?
I don't know
To me,
about
if we're,
elephants.
I don't know if we're talking about the same thing. To me, there was a giant wooden elephant on wheels. But anyway,
Huh.
go on. The
Well,
giant
in
gypsy
my
wagon.
in my perception, through 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 time or however this is remembered, what I remember was a gypsy wagon, and there was like this little parade of these like vaudeville bohemian people, and I don't know, like fire jugglers. They were kind of, and the wagon started going back and forth, and going back and forth some more, and then some more people kind of piled on. So this like funny little procession, and somehow I got it. Me and maybe whoever I was hanging out with, we got it into our heads that Phish was in that wagon, and that was going to be the secret set, and they were going to march around and like eventually do a surprise set in the wagon. So this is what we thought was going to happen. So it was marching around, and then I started getting, you start getting weird, like deep you start thinking really deep about things. I started thinking like, man, this is just the whole Phish experience. We're all just following this thing mindlessly, and it's just we're all gonna die, and like like getting real existential and funny about it. And then the wagon it parked somewhere, and me and a guy were just there like, okay, they're gonna come out, they're gonna do their set. We were just standing watching this thing for like, I don't know, 2 hours, and because of the way our minds were. And there was one guy, he was kind of like trying to. It seemed like there was somebody guarding it, maybe like somebody on the staff was, and a guy was trying to ask him all these tricky questions, like trick him into saying that Phish was going to play there. So there about 2 hours, kind of gave up, and then found out later that actually the sound check had just happened. They were doing the sound check jam. We missed the sound check jam because of all this. So kind of a funny, weird story, but also the way things were in 2004, kind of a metaphor for the whole thing in a weird way. The way your mind thinks of makes profound connections out of nothing. So that's my funny, weird story.
When was this show played?
So today's Tweezer from August 1st, 2021 was played at Alpharetta. This was night 1 of 2 nights or night 2 of the 2 nights? Night 2. All right.
Night 2.
So over the last couple of episodes, we've had a lot of people on who want to talk about shows from this summer 2021 tour. And the more you listen to it, the more obvious it becomes why this tour was so popular, why it's so strong. So I wanted to ask you just a couple questions about what it was like. Personally, I only went to see 3 shows this summer. I only went to the Atlantic City weekend run. I remember the build-up to this tour opening in Arkansas, I believe it was, right? And so this was the first tour back from the canceled one in 2020. Where were each of you leading up to this? Were you, in terms of COVID, was that a worry? I have a feeling that geographically where it was might have felt a little different than where it was in the Northeast. Culturally, I think it might have been a little different, or maybe not, because it's Phish tour and not real life. And there was also these conversations about whether this counts as 4.0 or is it still 3.0. A ton of great jams, a lot of group-centered and slow build jamming. A lot of space rock kind of that didn't always hold together, but kind of held everyone's interest at the same time. And a lot of new songs, by the way. Like I Never Needed You Like This Before. Lonely Trip was new. Mull, Mike played a couple of times. So I know, Hannah, it was your first show, or at least not this first show, but at least your first run, your first experience live and in person. Nate, you've been around a little bit longer. Nate, do you remember where your head was at leading in to this summer 2021 tour? Were you afraid? Were you confident? Were you somewhere in between?
I think I'd had my second shot by then, and that made me feel better about it. I know that people were still maybe getting it even after being vaccinated, but I think it had gotten to a point where I knew people had gotten it and were fine. And I think genetically I've been blessed because nobody in my family, everybody got it, but it wasn't bad for anybody. So it may have kind of diffused a little bit by that point, but it was still like, gotta be careful. Like I brought masks. It was like when we went down front, I brought a mask. I don't think it stayed on very long. I was a little preachy about vaccines. I told Hannah, like, you have to go get your shot. But yeah, a little nervous, but not, didn't stop me from going because it was like, damn it.
Yes, Phish.
Then that was the first big thing that I went to, I think, during COVID. Was the first big thing you went to, Anna?
Mm-hmm. Same. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd heard there had been some outbreaks after like other shows. It was like, well, I mean, we can't just live in fear forever, and we have to go do a thing. And if I get COVID and die because of a Phish show, like, I've seen an awesome Phish show. Yeah.
Hannah, what was your mentality? You mentioned earlier that you were just so excited, couldn't get better, ready to spring forth into this world.
Yeah. So I was a little anxious just with it being the first big event that I had gone to since the pandemic had hit and stuff, or since things were starting to begin to open up. I was taking the precautions as necessary. I brought a mask as well, but similar to Nate, it really didn't stay on too long. It was really hot and really muggy. And I
So
remember
hot.
the second show or the night 2, right before the show, there was a huge storm. And as soon as we got into the venue, we all had to like hide under the merch tables or the merch tents and whatnot. And so it was kind of hard to like stick to protocol. So I guess when you got there and there was kind of like not much that you could do about the situation you were in, I just tried to make the most of it. I enjoyed it. I then ended up getting vaccinated like a couple of days after because I got a call from my aunt who offered me a job up in New York. And so I was getting ready to go move to New York City for about a month or so. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. But leading up to that, I had some subtle anxieties, but since I was already playing in Asheville and things were kind of opening back up there and people that I was around were taking good precautions and stuff, I felt comfortable being around people already. It was different being at a huge amphitheater, but it was something that I was able to easily adapt to. And I was just way too excited to see Phish that my thoughts about these kinds of things were like not as important as seeing Phish at the time. So
yeah,
Overall, which night was better?
Night
This
2.
night? Night 2?
two.
Night
for
2
sure.
was like night 1 was like my first Phish show, but I tell people that night 2 was like my real first Phish show. Like
That sounds about right. Yeah,
it was like my first like the big experience. Night 1 was like the prereq for it, which was still amazing. But night 2 I was zoned in. It was great.
well, I'd say night 1 felt kind of like a backyard barbecue. It was more cozy, and it wasn't. I don't know if they really super throw down a lot, but it still felt great.
Really good.
My highlight from night 1 was Turtle in the Clouds, we said, and also the Caspian out of Chalk Dust. It's weird to say that a Caspian is a highlight because Caspian, but it got so ambient. It was just so like just out on the rings of Saturn. And my mind was also out on the rings of Saturn at the same time. And a Caspian was just sublime. It was wonderful.
Getting to hear
but
Maze for the first time, night 1
yeah,
live was a spiritual experience for me. I remember like during Paige's solo, I was getting so into it. I was like hitting the ground. And then during the Stash Jam that I think it was like they played that like shortly after, that jam was really cool. And it got, I don't remember, I think it went a little Phrygian in there, which is, they got a little flatted some notes. And so I was just
check
sitting
that out
down,
again.
absorbing all of the music that was coming. I think I enjoyed set 1 of night 1 more out of night 1 as a whole, but set 2 or night 2 itself was just like one after the next. Just I can't believe I'm experiencing this right now. When I got when the Buried Alive opener hit, I was like, oh, we're in for it.
That's always a good sign.
Like,
it's always a good sign when they open with Buried Alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it should be noted that both of these nights have several songs. If this is a metric, take it for what it's worth. Both of these nights have songs that are listed on the Phish.net jam charts. Night 1, Everything's Right is up there. Foam, unexpectedly to me, is up there. Chalk Dust Torture.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Chalk Dust Torture, Nate, your Caspian is on the jam charts. And that's it for night 1. But night 2 also has Run Like an Antelope. And then this kind of suite of music from set 2 of Tweezer, Twist, and Piper. So, and that's just beside what other songs were played that you just may enjoy even at their most basic level. So these, at least according to who as a community we have designated as the guides, I don't know about the word experts because no one is really an expert at Phish, says the guy with the podcast, but they're at least standouts for both nights. It seems like this was a can't lose proposition. If you had to go to one night, it seemed like you didn't miss too much either way.
Well, you would have missed Tweezer if you only went to
Well, I guess that's true.
But yeah.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor. If you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways, if you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use, if you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it, or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance-bias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of attendance bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode. So Tweezer didn't quite open set two. More was played ahead of it, which I kind of see as a weird second set opener, although it is a big epic rock song. Nothing wrong with it. I would expect Tweezer to open the second set. Nate, can you give us just a quick elevator pitch of set one, like where your head was at after set one going into this big time second set?
Well, going into the big time second set, I had thought about it, and there's no telling what anybody's intention was, but I felt there was a little message and more, because I felt like it's been great. They haven't really thrown down yet the way we really are hoping they will throw down, and there must be something more to this. and there kind of absolutely was. It's more. It's not. Not what I would pick for an opener. In fact, I think Verita Love, I think we've said we don't want to play more. There's not many songs we've said that about. But anyway, it's fine because of it just made the anticipation like they are about to. I think we felt that Tweezer coming a mile away.
Set one spoke to me, and like I remember having just the experience for the first time of being at a Phish show, just like, oh my gosh, they're like talking about me and they're talking about my life right now. And as being at more Phish shows, I've began to kind of like enjoy that in like a community sense. But at my first Phish show, it was very personal. It was like, I feel like they're in my head right now. And then the next song would be like, yes, we are absolutely in your head right now. Can we not make it any more obvious? And so it was just really fun, just like dancing to all these songs. The Reba jam during this magnificent sunset that was happening after the storm. The Kill Devil Falls was really amazing. That was one song that I wasn't a huge fan of at first, but after playing it in a couple cover bands or playing it with the cover band, it grew on me. But after Alpharetta, I really began to love that song. Set one really set the tone for the night, and so
you were ready for that. You were ready for that Antelope.
Oh yeah, that was like the one song I was like when I came to Alpharetta, I was like I was chasing it.
I started calling you Hantelope.
Yeah, I started calling myself Hantelope. It was that was the Sparkle that they played. I know that's not everybody's favorite song, but that was the first Phish song I ever heard growing up as a kid. My parents didn't listen to Phish, but they only had Sparkle, which was so random. And so I just like loved it when they played that. But going into the second set, I had never heard More before. Like all of these new tunes, like Everything's Right, Set Your Soul Free, More, like I didn't know any of those. And so I was really enjoying them and like listening to the lyrics. But I did remember being like, okay, I wonder what they're going to give us after this. And then when they hit the Tweezer, I like lost my mind. But looking back into the set list now, I kind of love how they pair More Tweezer together because it's just more Tweezer. And, and I was just like, they're just going to give us some more Tweezer. And I was cool with it. I'm one of the few people, I'm the minority that enjoys More. I remember being at AC last year and they went into More, I think, to close the set. And I think I was the only one that got excited, like super giddy about it. I think it's funny and witty when the band opens or will put in those newer 4.0 Love and Light songs in the set and then hit you with a fat jam afterwards. I like what they're doing there.
It's so playful. They're so playful.
Yeah. It's making up for all the evil that they got in the past.
Well, they did give quite a fat jam on this one. In the beginning, the first thing I noticed while listening to this was Fishman was all over his samples during the Uncle Ebenezer breakdown, which I thought in 2021, it's a toy and they all have their toys that they like to play with. But I thought this was the first time, and this is 2 years later, approximately. The first time that I thought I heard Fishman use them intelligently, like where they should be, where they fit, and it just not as a novelty, that where he chose to hit those samples made sense within the larger context of this song. And it wasn't just to get a laugh out of the audience. From about 6 minutes or so, a little bit after the Uncle Ebenezer breakdown, Trey just has this kind of 4/4 power tweezer riff, which isn't anything exceptional yet, but they're just kind of marinating. But I heard on the recording, the audience recording, the crowd is just loving it. Maybe it's leftover excitement from more. Maybe it's that they finally got the tweezer that, Nate, you said you saw coming from a mile away. This is kind of the catharsis of it. But the crowd is really into it the whole time.
Yeah. I was going to say, very short, very brief sidebar. We're talking about samples. The Cavern encore from the night before. If you listen, there's the break at the end of Cavern. They just all come out at once. And it was so funny. And nobody really knew what it was because they had just started doing it. So that was a moment. If you listen to that Cavern, it's hysterical. Anyway, I just had to throw that in because we're talking about the samples, but back to Tweezer.
I remember that space that they had after Uncle Ebenezer before they go back into the riff, and just watching everybody, I felt it looked like everybody started dancing in like slow motion. And it was just really fun watching everybody get affected by like the sound waves that were coming through and seeing everybody get like having like Fishman's drum pad was more cohesive. I remember seeing on Reddit, like from shows before, being like, what is that? Like people just like not really knowing where that was coming from, and having that kind of be like a responsive thing that was happening in the music by that show. It was really fun to interact with Fishman's drum pad amidst the jams.
And I think around 9 minutes or so, it became apparent that this is going to be a fully jammed tweezer, proper noun, capital letters, fully jammed tweezer, as they start entering this kind of major key bliss territory. And then they speed up a little bit with a cool descending melody led by Trey, and then Mike jumps on. This sounds like a really good classic Tweezer. Before this one, I think my favorite one was December 30th, 2019 at Madison Square Garden, which was also about a half hour long and kind of sent wonderful shockwaves throughout the fan base. But while all this weird melody, descending melody is going on around 11 minutes, Fishman is keeping things steady. And this is where Page's synthesizers kind of wash over the whole sound. It adds a lot of color to what otherwise might sound like kind of a disjointed jam. I'm sure the two of you noticed that right away.
I have a emotional connection with that synthesizer tone because it's one Page synth voice that I feel like I've been able to replicate pretty well. It's a mono synth. I mean, it's a mono voice, and it's got just the right portamento, like bending between notes. That has this phasery thing, and it's got just the attack is softened just a little bit, and it's so velvety and wonderful. I love that is this, I don't know, 3.50. I mean, I don't know software version, but it is a quintessential contemporary Page sound that I just adore.
Around 14 or closer to 15 minutes, I guess, there's like the standard backbeat funk. Like we're only about halfway through this and we're already 15 minutes into this track, but Page is leading the way. And I wrote on theremin synth. I don't know what that was. And I even asked in my notes, is Trey even playing? Meanwhile, Mike is playing McGrupp. So things are happening all over the place. Hannah, I know this was your second show, not quite the novel. I mean, I'm sure the novelty was still there. Of course, you're still, new to the scene in person. But are you able as a musician to kind of lock in on all four members at once? Like when you hear Page's synthesizer, my uneducated ears calls it a theremin. I know it's not literally that, but are you able to notice things like teases and synthesizer sounds, like Nate is talking about certain voices, while being surrounded by all this craziness in real time that may or may not be in slow motion?
I definitely, especially in my first show, I was unable to like really think about the music on a technical term. I was just kind of going as an audience member. That's why I love live Phish, because then it's like as soon as the show's over, I can go then and listen to it as a musician. But there
Yeah.
were a couple things. I'm not super educated on the synthesizer realms quite yet. So there's specific sounds that I can recognize, but nothing where I'm like, oh, he's playing this keyboard now and now he's going to this. That was at the time I wasn't really like up to speed on that yet. I caught the Esther teas though. I remember being in
Yes.
listening and I was just like, are what? I was like, how did they get here? And then it just happened for like a split second and then they moved on to the
And
next
it just disappeared like
Uh-huh.
sand blowing
Yeah.
away. It was there and it was not there. It was like a mass hallucination. Like,
I
did
thought
it
that was
really
really cool.
happen? And it absolutely did. There's absolutely played those four chords, and it was Trey. It was really Trey. I listened to that today
Yeah.
just to kind of think a little more about how it went down. Like, Trey played that chord, and Paige kind of caught on, and Mike was doing it anyway already. So yeah, that was mystical,
It was mystical. I think it's
just
really
wild.
cool. After listening to this jam a handful of times, I was able to kind of zone in on like how they were able to modulate the key to make the jam interesting. And it seemed as if they had like these three main chunks that they all were kind of going in and out of together. There was like a B minor chunk, and then there was that F sharp minor chunk, and then there was like a majory chunk that all kind of had like a similar groove to it, and it all just kind of kept interweaving in and out of each other until they dropped you off into that funk where it was like the dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun,
Little
which was
flashlight.
That's what I
which
thought
was
I heard. Yeah,
totally
I
my
wrote that.
favorite part of the whole jam when he hit that stop with the ba 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 ba. I was losing my mind
Oh my God,
during that.
yes. Um,
Everybody was
Something I
partying.
noticed about stuff it sounds like a minor ninth, but I listened and I have a note. I have a timestamp with a note, but I'm on my phone. I can't switch to it. But they were playing that chord and that with that syncopation like very early in the jam, like briefly. And I made
Trey
my note. It
loves
was
his
like, oh, they're playing this E minor. We are going to hear this again. But if you listen, I don't have a timestamp, but they foreshadowed that, and then they came back to it like 20 minutes later, and it was like the absolute climax, really, of the whole evening. It was,
I do think that that jam was really cool. My friends and I have like dissected that jam multiple times, trying to get ideas out of it and stuff. You know, Trey loves his nine chords, and I love them too. So
yeah,
I'm cool with it.
yeah.
I wonder if we're looking at the same part. I know the end part, like the flashlight part with the P-Funk, but before that, a number of minutes before that, there's just like straight up rock and roll wailing around 18 and a half minutes. And then at 20, it's just peak after peak, just huge rock and roll. And then it calms down a little bit later. Like, to me, time slows down when I'm listening to Phish. We're like
Yeah.
jamming at the top of their game, because my notes say at 20 minutes, peak after peak. And then at 21 minutes, it calms down. But those peaks at 20 minutes to me could have been 10 minutes in my head. It was literally a 1 minute stretch.
Yeah.
It slowed down for me.
They've got really good at peaking in the key of B. Because if I recall, I might be wrong, but I think that part in the jam, they are in B. I'll have to go back and correct myself if I am, but that was a raging. It was raging. I thought that the jam was going to be over at that point. I thought so
too.
I thought we were in for something new, and then they got brought it down and went back into their soup, and I was like, oh man, we're still in this.
There's all these pieces like Page's synth thing and that octavey thing that Trey had, that because there's a stop with that. I had to go. I was listening to it. I could not tell if it was Trey or Mike, so I had to go find the video because Mike was playing like airtight. It sounded like the same instrument with the bass. It was so locked in with the bass for a minute. I had to go check the video, but it was Trey, and then so all of those things, the octave thing and the Page's synthy thing. All of it came together, and that towards the end, like all these pieces, they just threw them all back in there into this glorious mess of just
glorious mess.
Toward the end, about 22 and a half minutes, there was I wrote it was a Page and Fishman special, because I remember reading, I think it's in the Phish book, where one of their jamming activities or one of the things they would do in practice is they would start with a groove, everyone would have to be in on it, and then two of them would drop out while the other two had to keep playing it. And then they tried to figure out, they made each member play with the other three members and make sure that everyone could hold their own and form a really solid link with every other band member, no matter who the partners were. And I think it was in the Phish book where I think it was Page who said that the weakest link was him and Fishman. That you never really think of a good jam where it's just keyboards and drums, because that, especially when it comes to more traditional rock music, that rarely happens unless you're Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But they tried every iteration of 2x2, and it turned out that they felt the weakest link was Page and Phish. And that's not the case at about 23 minutes because the crowd is loving it. And it's just the big piece is Page and Fishman.
There are some moments with Page on his whirly and the hi-hats. There was the change in the hi-hats, and the whirly were like the same instrument for a minute or two. It really was just, and to me, I have to learn about paying attention. It's most natural for me to follow the guitar. I've been getting better at following the drums more with our gigs. And it's got a lot to do with just the way you're facing, the way you have things set up, and eye contact and those kind of things. But yeah, you really the drums and the whirly and the hi-hat in that moment. That was a little earlier in the jam, but that is the one thing that stood out to me.
And it ends around 30-ish minutes with this descending groove. And I wrote, is this from a P-Funk song? You called it, it's Flashlight, right?
It sounds like Flashlight-ish, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not exactly that. I wrote it was some Jungian P-Funk song that was never actually played, but somehow exists in all of our musical memories. It's like a collective funk song.
It's a conglomerate.
Yeah. Yeah, Anton Fishman is using his sample pad for good. Yeah, like for if only you could use your powers for good, he finally did it instead of just for laughs.
Oh, I was just gonna say that was so awesome. Just that P-Funk that they hit. That was definitely probably a highlight of me, or a highlight for the whole show for me. Everybody was grooving so hard. It was so awesome.
And they must have felt the same way because Trey starts playing the riff for Twist to go into it. And from everything I've read and heard, and I've listened to it, of course, but from the people who were there, say that riff was just kind of Tweezer spillover, like the good jams that was in it. Would you agree with that?
The Twist just made so much sense after that Tweezer, like jam-wise. It kind of gave them the space to like have a cohesive song, but then to dip right back into the jams that they were in. I felt like we didn't get like lifted back up from the jam realms. It was just like they just sent us back in it, because that was a long twist that they played after. We got a good,
was it like 13 minutes or so?
13 to 15 minutes of more jams. Yeah, we were in it.
And then maybe some days, maybe my favorite most sacred Phish song, Piper. That moment going into Piper, I lost it. It was so good.
I was so excited for you too, because I remember being in the car and you were like,
I was like, yes, please, Piper, yes, please.
I did it.
And he got really into his delay, and then not the first time he did that, but it was a new thing, that very fast, and then the almost like early U2. Like the delay was so tight and it was so locked in, and it was, any other night that would have been the highlight of the show, but it had come after that Tweezer, and it still was like secondary highlight. Personally, for me, Piper is the ultimate. So to get a Piper after all of that, it was next level. It was that sequence, seen 20 something ish shows going back to 99, a lot of 3.0. That was probably the best sequence, the Tweezer Twist Piper, that I've seen of anything.
Well, Nate and Hannah from, respectively, Adam Knight's Buried Alive and the Lumpy Heads, thank you so much for being here on Attendance Bias to talk about Tweezer, plus a little bit extra, on August 1st, 2021 at Alpharetta. So one more time, Nate, can you just give a quick plug for your band or bands, everything you got to say? Hannah, please do the same afterward.
Adam Knight's Buried Alive, that's our domain name, adamknightsburiedalive.com. We have a Facebook page. We also have a Facebook group that we've just started, so we're kind of using that for polling and market research and silliness. Hannah, if you're on Facebook, join our group. Everybody else? Yeah. Oh, you are in our group. Okay, cool. And then my other band is called Origami. So it's Origami. The domain is origamiband.com, and that is also on Facebook. We play a good bit around. Well, they travel some too. They have to get a sub sometimes because they have both bands and kids to manage. But those two, Buried Alive, we do have some good clips on YouTube. There is a awesome 18-minute sample that we played in Raleigh. That would be my first thing to show anybody that wants to hear an 18-minute thing. But anyway, yep, those two bands. Look us up, friend us, say hi, like us, join our group.
And Hannah, where can all the listeners hear you?
You can check out the Lumpy Heads every Thursday at the One Stop in Asheville, North Carolina, or online at IMAVL. We live stream every Thursday. And then we are on Instagram and Facebook, the Lumpy Heads. And then Fern is my band based in Greenville. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook at fern.band. We've got a bunch of shows coming up this summer. We're playing in Greenville, South Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, and have a show in Atlanta. So if any of you Southeastern folks enjoy Sweetwater Tap Room, we're playing there in July. So or in June. If you want to look at our Instagram, we've got all of our dates there. But come check us out. We love it, and we love to dance and get down with other people, and yeah, just sharing the groove.
All right, Nate, Hannah, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you.
And that's it for today's episode with Hannah and Nate. And to make sure we got everything right, it is now time for the very short attendance bias fact check.
Attendance bias fact check.
Hannah joined the Lumpy Heads by joining one day and never leaving, and I compared it to Lou Gehrig. For a little baseball history, on June 2nd, 1925, New York Yankees first baseman Wally Pipp complained of a headache when he got to the stadium for that day's game. The Yankees manager, Miller Huggins, benched Pipp and put Lou Gehrig in at first base in Pipp's place. Gehrig would go on to start 2,130 games at first, never relinquishing the position until his retirement. Wally Pipp has been quoted as saying, quote, "I took the 2 most expensive aspirins in history." While I haven't been able to find the details about Coventry, it has been confirmed that there was a Roma-style wooden carriage at the festival that was intended to be a centerpiece for the band's late-night, quote, secret set. However, due to the mud and I'm sure other backstage circumstances, the set never came to pass. You Enjoy Myself is indeed the most often played Phish song, having been performed 603 times to date. Second is Possum, having been played 551 times, according to Zizix's iHoz Labs website Phish Stats. The twist that came after Tweezer has an official timing of 11 minutes and 13 seconds. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank very much Nate and Hannah for joining me today, Phish.net and Zizix for their help with the fact check, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show by visiting www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donating anything you can. You can also follow Attendance Bias on social media. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next week on Attendance Bias.